The silence came into the room, and the silence lasted. George chuckled. I bet Lenny's right out there in the barn with his pup. He won't want to come in here no more now he's got a pup. Slim said, Candy, you can have any one of them pups you want. Candy didn't answer. The silence fell on the room again. It came out of the night and invaded the room. George said, Anybody like to play a little euchre? I'll play out a few with you, said Whit. They took places opposite each other at the table under the light, but George did not shuffle the cards. He rippled the edge of the deck nervously, and the little snapping noise drew the eyes of all the men in the room, so he stopped doing it. The silence fell on the room again. A minute passed, and another minute. Candy lay still, staring at the ceiling. Slim gazed at him for a moment and then looked down at his hands. He subdued one hand with the other and held it down. There came a little gnawing sound from under the floor, and all the men looked down toward it gratefully. Only Candy continued to stare at the ceiling. Sounds like there was a rat under there, said George. We ought to get a trap down there. Whit broke out. What the hell's taking him so long? Lay out some cards, why don't you? We ain't gonna get no euchre played this way. George brought the cards together tightly and studied the backs of them. The silence was in the room again. A shot sounded in the distance. The men looked quickly at the old man. Every head turned toward him. For a moment he continued to stare at the ceiling. Then he rolled slowly over and faced the wall and lay silent. The door opened quietly and the stable buck put in his head, a lean Negro head lined with pain, the eyes patient. Mr. Slim. Slim took his eyes off from old Candy. Huh? Oh, hello, Crooks, what's the matter? You told me to warm up tar for that mule's foot. I got it warm. Oh, sure, Crooks. I'll come right out and put it on. I can do it if you want, Mr. Slim. No, I'll come do it myself. He stood up. Crooks, said Mr. Slim. Yeah. That big new guy's messing around your pups out in the barn. Well, he ain't doing no harm. I give him one of them pups. Just thought I'd tell you, said Crooks. He's taking 'em out of the nest and handling them. That won't do them no good. He won't hurt them, said Slim. I'll come along with you now. George looked up. That crazy bastard's fooling around too much. Just kick him out, Slim. Slim followed the stable buck out of the room. George dealt and Whit picked up his cards and examined them. Seen the new kid yet? He asked. What kid? George asked. Why, Curly's new wife. Yeah, I seen her. Well, ain't she a Lulu? I ain't seen that much of her, said George. Whit laid down his cards impressively. Well, stick around and keep your eyes open. You'll see plenty. She ain't concealing nothing. I never see nobody like her. She got the eye going all the time on everybody. I bet she even gives the stable buck the eye. I don't know what the hell she wants. George asked casually, Been any trouble since she got here? It was obvious that Whit was not interested in his cards. He laid his hand down and George scooped it in. Whit said, I see what you mean. No, they ain't been nothing yet. Curly's got yellow jackets in his drawers, but that's all so far. Every time the guys is around, she shows up. She's looking for Curly, or she thought she left something laying around and she's looking for it. Seems like she can't keep away from guys. And Curly's pants is just crawling with ants, but they ain't nothing come of it yet. George said, She's going to make a mess. There's going to be a bad mess about her. She's a jailbait, all set on the trigger. And that Curly got his work cut out for him. Ranch with a bunch of guys on it ain't no place for a girl, especially like her. The door opened and Lenny and Carlson came in together. Lenny crept to his bunk and sat down, trying not to attract attention. Carlson said casually, Curly been in yet? No, said Whit. What's eating on Curly? Oh, looking for his old lady. I seen him going around and around outside. Whit said sarcastically, he spends half his time looking for her and the rest of the time she's looking for him. Curly burst into the room excitedly. Any of you guys seen my wife? He demanded. She ain't been in here, said Whit. Curly looked threateningly around the room. Where the hell's Slim? Went out in the barn, said George. He was going to put some tar on a split hoof. Curly's shoulders dropped and squared. How long ago did he go? 5, 10 minutes. Curly jumped out the door, and it banged after him. Whit stood up. I guess maybe I'd like to see this, he said. Curly's just spoiling, or he wouldn't start for Slim. And Curly's handy, goddamn handy. Got in the finals for the Golden Gloves. He's got newspaper clippings about it. He considered, but just the same, he better leave Slim alone. Nobody don't know what Slim can do. Think Slim's with his wife, don't he? Said George. Looks like it, Whit said. Of course, Slim ain't. At least I don't think Slim is. But I'd like to see the fuss if it comes off. Come on, let's go. George said, I'm staying right here. I don't want to get mixed up in nothing. Lenny and me got to make a steak. Carlson finished the cleaning of the gun, and he put it in the bag and pushed the bag under his bunk. I guess I'll go out and look her over, he said. Old Candy lay still, and Lenny from his bunk watched George cautiously. When Whit and Carlson were gone and the door closed after them, George turned to Lenny. What you got on your mind? I ain't done nothing, George. Slim says I better not pet them pups so much for a while. Slim says it ain't good for them, so I come right in. I've been good, George. I could have told you that, said George. Well, I wasn't hurting them none. I just had mine in my lap petting it. George asked, Did you see Slim out in the barn? Sure I did. He told me I better not pet that pup no more. Did you see that girl? You mean Curly's girl? Yeah. Did she come in the barn? No. Anyways, I never seen her. You never seen Slim talking to her? She ain't been in the barn. Okay, said George. I guess them guys ain't gonna see no fight. If there's any fighting, Lenny, you keep out of it. George, how long's it gonna be till we get that little place and live off the fat of the land? And rabbits. I don't know, said George. We gotta get a big steak together. I know a little place we can get cheap, but they ain't giving it away. Old Candy turned slowly over. His eyes were wide open. He watched George carefully. Lenny said, Tell about that place, George. I just told you, just last night. Go on, tell it again, George. Oh, well, it's 10 acres, said George. It's got a little windmill, it's got a little shack on it, and a chicken run. Got a kitchen, orchard, cherries, apples, peaches, cots, nuts, got a few berries. There's a place for alfalfa and plenty of water to flood it. There's a pig pen and rabbits. George? No place for rabbits now, but I could easy build a few hutches and you could feed alfalfa to the rabbits. Damn right I could, said Lenny. You goddamn right I could. George's hand stopped working the cards. His voice was growing warmer. And we could have a few pigs. I could build a smokehouse like the one Grandpa had. And when we kill a pig, we can smoke the bacon and the hams and make sausage and all like that. And when the salmon run up the river, we could catch 100 of them and salt 'em down or smoke 'em. We could have them for breakfast. When the fruit come in, we could can it. Every Sunday we'd kill a chicken or a rabbit. Maybe we'd have a cow or a goat. The cream is so goddamn thick, you got to cut it with a knife and take it out with a spoon. Lenny watched him with wide eyes, and old Candy watched him too. Lenny said softly, We could live off of the fat of the land. Sure, said George. All kinds of vegetables in the garden, and if we want a little whiskey, we can sell a few eggs or something, or some milk. We'd just live there. We'd belong there. There wouldn't be no more running around the country. No, sir, we'd have our own place where we belonged, and not sleep in no bunkhouse. And rabbits, Lenny said eagerly, and I'd take care of them. Tell how I would do that, George. Sure, you'd go out in the alfalfa patch and you'd have a sack. You'd fill up the sack and bring it out and put in the rabbit cages. They'd nibble and they'd nibble, said Lenny, the way they do. I seen 'em. When Candy spoke, they both jumped as though they had been caught doing something reprehensible. Candy said, You know where there's a place like that? George was on guard immediately. Suppose I do, he said. What's that to you? You don't need to tell me where it's at. It might be any place. Sure, said George. That's right. You couldn't find it in 100 years. Candy went on excitedly. How much they want for a place like that? George watched him suspiciously. Well, I could get it for 600 bucks. The old people that owns it is flat bust and the old lady needs an operation. Say, what's it to you? You got nothing to do with us. Candy said, I ain't much good with only one hand. Lost my hand right here on this ranch. That's why they give me a job swampin'. And they give me $250 'cause I lost my hand. And I got 50 more saved up right in the bank right now. That's 300. And I got 50 more coming at the end of the month. Tell you what. He leaned forward eagerly. Suppose I went in with you guys. That's 350 bucks I'd put in. I ain't much good, but I could cook and tend the chickens and hoe the garden some. How'd that be? George half closed his eyes. I gotta think about that. We was always gonna do it by ourselves. Candy interrupted him. I'd make a will and leave my share to you guys in case I kick off, 'cause I ain't got no relatives nor nothing. You guys got any money? Maybe we could do it right now. George spat on the floor disgustedly. We got 10 bucks between us. Then he said thoughtfully, Look, if me and Lenny work a month and don't spend nothing, we'll have 100 bucks. That'd be 450. I bet we could swing her for that. And then you and Lenny could go get her started, and I'd get a job and make up the rest. And you could sell eggs and stuff like that. They fell into a silence. They looked at one another, amazed. So this thing they had never really believed in was coming true. George said reverently, Jesus Christ, I bet we could swing her. His eyes were full of wonder. I bet we could swing her, he repeated softly. Candy sat on the edge of his bunk. He scratched the stump of his wrist nervously. I got hurt 4 years ago, he said. They'll can me pretty soon. Just as soon as I can't swap out no bunkhouses, they'll put me out on the country. Maybe if I give you guys my money, you'll let me hoe in the garden, even after I ain't no good at it. And I'll wash dishes and little stuff like that. But I'll be on our own place, and I'll be let to work on our own place. He said miserably, You seen what they done to my dog tonight? They says he wasn't no good to himself, nor nobody else. When they can me here, I wish somebody'd shoot me. But they won't do nothing like that. I won't have no place to go, and I can't get no more jobs. I'll have $30 more comin' time you guys is ready to quit. George stood up. We'll do her, he said. We'll fix up that little old place and we'll go live there. He sat down again. They all sat still, all bemused by the beauty of the thing. Each mind was popped into the future when this lovely thing should come about. Lenny broke in. When we gonna do it, George? In 1 month, right smack in 1 month. Know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna write to them old people that owns the place that will take it, and Candy'll send $100 to bind her. Sure will, said Candy. They got a good stove there? Sure, got a nice stove, burns coal or wood. I'm gonna take my pup, said Lenny. I bet by Christ he likes it there, by Jesus. Candy said, George. Huh. I ought to have shot that dog myself, George. I shouldn't have ought to let no stranger shoot my dog. The door opened. Slim came in, followed by Curly and Carlson and Whit. Slim's hands were black with tar, and he was scowling. Curly hung close to his elbow. Curly said, Well, I didn't mean nothing, Slim. I just asked you. Slim said, Well, you've been asking me too often. I'm getting goddamn sick of it. If you can't look after your own goddamn wife, what do you expect me to do about it? You lay off of me. I'm just trying to tell you I didn't mean nothing, said Curly. I just thought you might have saw her. Why don't you tell her to stay the hell home where she belongs, said Carlson. You let her hang around bunkhouses, and pretty soon you're going to have something else on your hands, and you won't be able to do nothing about it. Curly whirled on Carlson. You keep out of this unless you want to step outside. Carlson laughed. You goddamn punk, he said. You tried to throw a scare into Slim, and you couldn't make it stick. Slim throwed a scare into you. You're as yellow as a frog belly. I don't care if you're the best welter in this country. You come for me, and I'll kick your goddamn head off. Curly glared at him. His eyes slipped on past and lighted on Lenny. and Lenny was still smiling with the delight of the memory of the ranch. Curly stepped over to Lenny like a terrier. And what the hell you laughing at? Lenny looked blankly at him. Huh? Then Curly's rage exploded. Come on, you big bastard, get up on your feet. No big son of a bitch is gonna laugh at me. I'll show you who's yella. Lenny looked helplessly at George, and then he got up and tried to retreat, but Curly was balanced and poised. He slashed at Lenny with his left, and then smashed down on his nose with the right. Lenny gave a cry of terror. Blood welled from his nose. George, he cried, make him let me alone, George. He backed until he was against the wall, and Curly followed, slugging him in the face. Lenny's hands remained at his side. He was too frightened to defend himself. George was on his feet, yelling, Get him, Lenny! Don't let him do it! Lenny covered his face with his huge paws and bleated with terror. He cried, Make him stop, George! And then Curly attacked his stomach and cut off his wind. Slim jumped up. That dirty little rat, he cried. I'll get him myself. George put out his hand and grabbed Slim. Wait a minute, he shouted. He cupped his hands around his mouth and yelled, Get him, Lenny! Lenny took his hands away from his face and looked about for George, and Curly slashed at his eyes. The big face was covered with blood. George yelled again, I said get him! Curly's fist was swinging when Lenny reached for it. And the next minute, Curly was flopping like a fish on a line, and his closed fist was lost in Lenny's big hand. George ran down the room. Let go of him, Lenny. Let go. But Lenny watched in terror the flopping little man whom held. Blood ran down Lenny's face. One of his eyes was cut and closed. George slapped him in the face again and again, and still Lenny held on to the closed fist. Curly was white and shrunken by now, and his struggling had become weak. He stood crying, his fist lost in Lenny's paw. George shouted over and over, Let go of his hand, Lenny, let go. Slim, come help me while this guy got any hand left. Suddenly, Lenny let go his hold. He crouched cowering against the wall. You told me to, George, he said miserably. Curly sat down on the floor, looking in wonder at his crushed hand. Slim and Carlson bent over him, and then Slim straightened up and regarded Lenny with horror. We gotta get him to a doctor, he said. Looks to me like every bone in his hand is bust. I didn't want to, Lenny cried. I didn't want to hurt him. Slim said, Carlson, you get the candy wagon hitched up, and we'll take him to Soledad and get him fixed up. Carlson hurried out. Slim turned to the whimpering Lenny. It ain't your fault, he said. This punk sure had it coming to him, but Jesus, he ain't hardly got no hand left. Slim hurried out, and in a moment returned with a tin cup of water. He held it to Curly's lips. George said, Slim, will we get canned now? We need the steak. Will Curly's old man can us now? Slim smiled wryly. He knelt down beside Curly. You got your senses hand enough to listen, he asked. Curly nodded. Well, then listen, Slim went on. I think you got your hand caught in a machine, and if you don't tell nobody what happened, we ain't going to. But you just tell and try to get this guy canned, and we'll tell everybody, and that will get you the laugh. I won't tell, said Curly, and he avoided looking at Lenny. Buggy wheels sounded outside. Slim helped Curly up. Come on now, Carlson's going to take you to a doctor, and he helped Curly out of the door. The sound of wheels drew away. In a moment, Slim came back into the bunkhouse. He looked at Lenny, still crouched fearfully against the wall. Let's see your hands, he asked. Lenny stuck out his hands. Christ almighty, I'd hate to have you mad at me, Slim said. George broke in. Lenny was just scared, he explained. He didn't know what to do. I told you nobody ought to never fight him. No, I guess it was Candy I told. George turned to Lenny. It ain't your fault, he said. You don't need to be scared no more. You done just what I told you to. Maybe you better go to the washroom and clean up your face. You look like hell. Lenny smiled with his bruised mouth. I didn't want no trouble, he said. He walked toward the door, but just before he came to it, he turned back. George, what do you want? I can still tend the rabbits, George? Sure. You ain't done nothing wrong. I didn't mean no harm, George. Well, get the hell out and wash your face.